Hello everyone, my name is Rodolpho Kanecadan. I am here presenting my final project at Gordon College for the Communication Arts major, and in my case, I designed a video game. I prepared a design document that includes everything that will be necessary for the game to go into full production. It is in many different ways similar to producing a script for a film where it combines a lot of the pre-production of a game and the story and the mechanics and everything to then go and produce the game afterwards, which is something I am planning to do after I graduate college as a full personal project. Anyway, this game that I have been designing is called the Quantic Sphere. Uh, and it has been very interesting because I know it's unusual to have a project like this be developed for a communication art program. But given my experience and practice with both screenwriting and with video games and knowing the medium from the inside and out, I felt confident that I could do this and excel at it. So I wanted to explain why I chose this specifically for my senior project when many times it might not be considered the most natural option or the most common option for a course like this. So, just to give an idea about games and why I think it's important for games to be tackled in topics of social awareness and other topics that really matter and have true depth to them is that, as you can see here, games are no bigger than the film and the music industry combined. These are old art forms. The film industry has been around for over 100 years now almost, and the music industry has existed. Music has existed throughout the history of humanity, and as an industry, they're both being beaten. Honestly, every major entertainment industry is being beaten by games. More people are seeing it, more people are playing it, and there is more revenue involved in it, which really makes a lot of people, a lot of investors interested in this. And it has only been growing. So more and more eyes are looking at this medium. And for all intents and purposes, this is a very young medium. It started as it is known today, not as just some experiment in the lab with the first computers, but as a commercial business in 1971, which means it is far younger than any other massive entertainment medium. And just like any other entertainment medium that's still growing and still learning how to fit its own space, it still lacks meaningful messages. Now, there are some here and there that are praised and are seen as achievements, and they truly are, but it's much through much in the same way that we see innovation in films and in music back when they first started, where it was the first time someone was making use of an effect that told stories in a more modern fashion in films. One of the reasons that a film like Citizen Kane is so praised for everything it did, it's because it innovated so much. But as we built and learned from it, if you go back now as someone who is not thinking about it as a historical moment in filmmaking, it'll seem mediocre because we all learned from that and grew beyond that. So it games are in a very similar situation right now where a lot of innovation is happening, but because there's so much to be discovered, there isn't a lot of depth. There aren't many meaningful messages that truly can affect how we see things. And it's a real shame because I believe that games have an extra layer to something like a film or a passive medium, which is the interactivity. And that, the ability to allow your players not only to experience what you've made, but allow them to have agency in what you made is incredible. And honestly, something that is sometimes not even approached in a good way in games that excel today. So, as I mentioned, interactivity gives another layer to immersion in games. And I see a problem with a lot of games, a lot of AAA games. This background you see here is from Uncharted 4, one of the biggest games out there, made by Naughty Dog, a studio that excels in making games that have deep storylines and beautiful graphics, but they're made like films. And to a lot of people, I hear this comment over and over and over and over around many articles, around many reviews, many pieces that it is a fantastic game. The games made by this company are incredible, but everyone who's playing is just playing to get to the next cutscene, the next story beat, which happen away from when the player is playing the game. So you were essentially playing portions of it until you get to the next scene that plays out like a movie with no influence from the player. Then back to the gameplay, and many consider the gameplay to be shallow and disconnected from the story. Where a huge example that people always bring up with this game that you see in the background here is you shoot 100 enemies and they shoot you back and you're fine. But the moment someone shoots you in a cutscene, that one shot, he has that bullet lodged in his shoulder for the rest of the game, and it makes it hard for him to move. And it makes so things that happen in cutscenes are disconnected to the things that happen when you play. And I think that that is such a miss for games because I truly believe that games have the possibility to give players agency, as I mentioned before. And with that, the story can be molded by the players. The story can be influenced, and the player can feel like they added something to the experience. I think that many times games that don't even have an overtly well written story can have better and deeper moments than a game that has well written story beats and everything that are completely controlled. They are different. You're not going to get the same emotional response as you would from a film or a game that emulates a film. But it's this deeply unique experience of personalizing what is happening to you. And I think when you try to apply that to narrative, there's a point there that isn't very well explored. And I think that is where I wanted to get into. I wanted to explore having narrative, but giving the player agency. And one thing that I wanted to do is even surprise the players with the own choices that they make, for them to realize that something that they made might have not been a good choice or a bad choice, but they just didn't have all the information they needed. So not that they will feel gypped by the game or tricked in a cheap way, but in a way that they had all the information but just didn't realize what they were doing because of bias or because of a limited perspective on a certain topic. So what do I want to do in Quantic Sphere, my game? Uh, First of all, I wanted to, just as a side mention, I have been putting different pieces of art and different pieces of parts of different games that I really love and I think that have affected me in some way. This image here that you see is from the game Fallout, which has very interesting undertones of corporate espionage, stuff like that, but never really tackles that. But yeah, so my approach in the game Quantic Dream will be to tackle this exact topic, the one of corporate corruption and espionage. I think that is a topic that is becoming so prevalent nowadays. We hear about governments joining in on this and mixing in with corporations and or who, just having this whole secondary level to the things we believe and that we vote for or that we buy in that we just don't have access to. And when it comes even to government um, corruption, I'm a student from Brazil, and in Brazil, everyone knows that the government does things that are unlawful, and nothing is done about it. And it has become expected, and it's really sad to see that it just is just shrugged away as something that happens and isn't really supposed to be fixed in any meaningful way because people feel powerless. So what I wanted to do with this is give people a better understanding that this is something that humans like you and me can really make a difference in. But first, they need to understand what is going on. It's difficult when something is normalized in people's minds. So to surprise and to truly bring this idea to the forefront, I think is imperative to kind of start kicking back and creating a solution, even if just planting a seed in people's minds for for fighting back against this. So in a in Quantic Dream, I also didn't want to make this a game that was solely a demonstration that would work 100%. Not that it won't, but that would work completely towards its theme and completely forego all that has been learned in the development of games throughout the years. I see a lot of games, they tend to be very small games that try to have messages with social impact in some way. Games made from people in Africa that speak to the lack of water, of fresh water. And I remember seeing this at an Apple conference where they made a game, but the game itself wasn't good. It was coming from a great place with a great message, but it just was not an incredibly fun game to play. So I want to make a game that truly engages those that are familiar with the medium, not only in mechanics, but also in narrative. So there's some things that people need to know to get different levels of what I'll be doing in this game. Some things like in a lot of games, you're just blindly following orders from your map, from a quest marker, and to be able to challenge those notions and make something, for example, that would be the obvious path to follow for someone who has played games in the past, but then to follow it and learn that it doesn't lead exactly to where you want to. I think that so those types of plays and subversion of expectations are things that I want to play with and I want to approach that will help and really catch players that are familiar with games by surprise. But also, I don't want it to be extremely hard for players who are starting for their first time, so that this message can really get out there and reach different people. I was speaking about Naughty Dog earlier, and they are known for making games easy for people who have never played a game to just kind of play them and kind of go through the scenes and watch them. And the way they make it easier, they make it easier for players who've never played is just that they dumb the game down completely, and that's just something I am not interested in doing. I think that even people who haven't played games, are able to play games effectively. Obviously, it won't be a super competitive game with high reflexes and all these things, but I think that games do not need to be dumbed down for new players. And that is something that I will be working with as a basis for the ongoing development of this game. And with the decisions that I was speaking earlier, I I want the players to be faced with moral decisions, and these are going to be morally ambiguous situations where they receive information from both sides, and they will have their own idea of what to do in this situation, but it might not be the right idea. And that's the approach I want to have in this game, is just have that ambiguity where you don't exactly know what is right or what is wrong, and you have to make decisions based off of that, and your decisions might actually harm what you're trying to do or aid you. And I don't want it to feel cheap just because they weren't given enough information, but I want it to come from a place of them not really knowing exactly what they should do, and from their background, how they grew up, what type of information that they had um, when they were learning about this beforehand, before playing this game. So that's the approach I kind of have with this game. So I wanted to speak a little bit to some of the inspirations that I had for this game. I think the major one is Metal Gear Solid game. This game that I am making will be, as I mentioned before, a stealth or espionage game. And Metal Gear Solid is known and seen as the best espionage game. The problem is that a lot of the espionage games, because of Metal Gear Solid, I believe, focus on the military aspect of it. They do not focus on anything else. It's about the gun, it's about sneaking into military bases, it's about military information, it's about wars. And I think that the genre has so much more, but a lot of mechanics that come have been improved through 30 years of this series. It started in the 80s, in 19 yeah, in the 80s, and they have just improved. So to ignore the improvements that have happened would be a shame, and would be a complete disservice to what I am trying to do. So some of the basic mechanics of stealth games will be will be based off of it and improved on things that were learned by the generations of Metal Gear Solid games. Another game series that I am going to that has worked as an influence to me was the BioShock series, and how they tell stories through the environment, and you go through the city that is completely destroyed, and you get there, and through going through the environments and going through these places, you learn what has happened through how it's become dilapidated and destroyed. And this game also takes part in philosophical criticism, and I think that it does so in a way that puts the player right inside of that. That is something I also want to emulate in some way when talking about the corruption that happens in companies, and I want that to be as effective or as thoughtful as it shows up in these Bioshock games. So they have also been a huge influence. So now, what exactly is Quantic Sphere going to be like? It will be a stealth and espionage game, so it will mirror a lot of its moment-to-moment gameplay without considering the military part. Will mirror some of the things that are seen in Metal Gear Solid. So walking around, trying not to be seen by certain people that you might want to try and avoid, as well as engaging with different non-playable characters or NPCs. And the big difference is that I won't be focusing on the military aspect of it. It's going to focus on what I've been calling civilian espionage. And that means that the focus will be more on dialogue and persuasion. And I believe that I also want to make it somewhat science fiction. I don't want it to be completely grounded. I want it to have some possibility of things that could happen depending on our future, on our choices. So I want it to be a little bit separated from our reality. But I believe that for things to have an impact, they don't have to have a completely grounded plot, but they have to have completely grounded emotions and characters. To me, I think that that is key to making something land. That's why I think that something like the series of The Mandalorian can, reach out to many people. Granted, not in a deep and philosophical way, but they can reach out. It can reach out, and people can really see themselves in different situations or as different characters, even though the world itself is somewhat of a completely fantastical world. So I truly believe that it does not have to be a completely grounded situation. So yes, it will be a game that focuses on dialogue and persuasion. So the dialogue system will be the focus, and how that will work is there will be, when you start talking to a character, it will present you with a word bank, and every time you use a word, it changes the word bank to fit the grammar and the situation. And the more you talk to people and the more things you read and you learn, new words pop into the word bank, and you're able to talk about different topics with different people and form different ways of saying things that might or might not alert them to different things. So that will be the core gameplay of this game. Will be forming sentences and trying to convince these characters of what you are saying. And this will also include different outfits, so that if you're in a place that you shouldn't be in, they don't have a problem with you being there. They kind of ignore you. So it's not just on the dialogue, but also on the image of your character, and that will also influence their ability to persuade the other NPCs. And again, I want to have meaningful decisions that will impact the story and the outcome of the story in this game. This will not be a huge scope of a game, given that it's made by one person, but I truly believe that there can be important decisions that are made there that affect everything and affect how these players will be seeing what they're doing and the outcomes that they end up with based on their own decisions. And I think that that will probably be the best and most meaningful way for me to present these ideas and talk about these topics directly to the player. But yeah, so that is my presentation on what I want for this game, Quantic Sphere, and why I think it is important for us to be tackling this in this moment as a game and as that industry, because of its size and how much it's grown and its impact that it can have in society. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much.